Well, does it make sense to you what they're doing here? Like, what would you say the buy-in level is?
I guess, look, they, I was surprised they did not try to keep Justin Fields. Arthur Smith, their offensive coordinator, really likes Justin Fields, even though, Justin sort of operated with the governor the 6 games that he started. It was very much a, hey, try not to lose it for us if you could. Approach. I think they showed a little more trust in him as that stretch went on. But as soon as Russell Wilson was available, they went to Russ, and they didn't go back to Justin even as the Steelers sputtered down the stretch. So, they looked at the draft and they said, look, we don't really see our guy in the draft. No offense to Will Howard, the kid from Ohio State who they got in the 6th round. So you might as well just take a flyer on a future Hall of Famer. See if you can kind of capture lightning in a bottle, and maybe something comes together. Maybe you win your first playoff game since 2016. It's hard to see that happening, but let's remember in the context of this too. They signed T.J. Watt to his extension that he was going to get the whole time. He was going to get $1 more than Myles Garrett. Like that's all T.J. wanted was $1 more. It was $1 million more a year ultimately than Myles Garrett, and they re-signed and they signed Omar Khan, their general manager, to a contract extension through 2030. So there's no heat on anybody here in 2025, including Mike Tomlin. So this is hey, let's just have some fun and kind of see what happens. I mean, it won't be boring, which sort of sucks because I was kind of looking forward to boring, from a workload standpoint. But it will be a very, very fascinating 6 months down here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, you'll have a lot to do. You'll have a lot to write about, storylines. I guess if you haven't said it, Will, with the Steelers, I mean, they were a pretty easy mark this offseason. With Rodgers, you dabble with Aaron Rodgers, you're going to hear it. And, Pickens isn't everybody's favorite, but a few things here sort of pointed you in a direction where can Pittsburgh just not have another season of middle 7 seed? Can the bottom fall out? I will say, though, I think if you're going to make the Rodgers move, you're fine doing the rest of it. Jalen Ramsey, and you got to pay Watt at that point. Like, once you push your chips in on Rodgers, the career he's had, I mean, you can't stop short and just play kids around him. Right. So I like that. I like this for that.
Right. I mean, my only pushback, and it's interesting, we haven't talked to really Mike Tomlin or any of these guys since the trade for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, a few weeks ago. If this was, and now the plan, as on July 22nd, the plan sort of, okay, we understand it, right? And nobody really did maybe on March 15th. Yeah. And to me, that the part that's like George Pickens was a problem child, to be very clear. The way that he was with us, got people that do what I do for a living, what we do, was the way that he was with some of his teammates and some of his coaches. That was an untenable situation. However, if you're going to go all in on one season, right, why not gamble? If you're going to gamble, I mean, if you're gambling anyway, what's another chip in the ante by keeping George Pickens? I mean, to get a 3rd-round pick for him, probably at the height of his value, because it's more likely had they kept him, you would respect the ambition, but it's likely it would have gone sideways at some point, and then you're trying to get rid of him at the trade deadline for a 6th-rounder, right? So I get it, but I just think the offense is better for one season with DK Metcalf and George Pickens than DK Metcalf and to Jonnu Smith, who had an excellent year last year in Miami, but they already have a Jonnu Smith type tight end in Pat Freiermuth, right? So it'll be very interesting to kind of see how they go. But yeah, that's they are not mailing it in. They when they let Fields go and let Russell Wilson go, and it looked like Rodgers was using them as maybe collateral to leverage to try to get himself in maybe a more favorable position elsewhere, and those positions dried up. You could see, they signed Mason Rudolph 5-12 and the number 7 pick in the draft, in which is going to be held in Pittsburgh. Here we come, and I think it's it's more likely. You're talking about there's lots of different ways to get to 9-8 and 10-7, and the Steelers have found seemingly all of them in the last 2 years.
Yep.
I do not see that scenario happening this time. I think this could work out. This could be 14-3, or this could be 6-11. I don't think there's a lot of room for kind of the middle of the road stuff. I really think this is considering the stakes, and the all-in mentality for one season. I really think it's going to be a kind of an all or nothing situation for these guys.
Well, I really like the point you make about Pickens and like they're all in, but still feeling like they need to divest themselves of that guy. That might, you're taking the team's word for it more than and yours. You're around him. You're saying like you know how he treated you guys.
It was definitely a problem, but like they've had bigger problems.
Yeah,
that they've managed.
Right. It really speaks to how maybe scared might be too strong, but worried they were that he could just mess up this year. That they're really trying to mount the thing and just go for it.
Yeah, everybody's saying all the right things in Dallas, but let's see what happens in like week 4 when CeeDee Lamb has 12 for 155 and 2 touchdowns, and George has 3 targets, 1 catch for 12 yards, and misses a block. Or 6, or doesn't even bother to block, right? Let's see what's happening. But just from a pure potential standpoint, potentially the Steelers' offense is better with George Pickens than Johnny Smith.
How much of a difference do you think it will be for Rodgers to go from the circus that was the New York Jets, recognizing that he brings some element of the circus with him everywhere he goes, like Mike alluded to at the outset of this conversation? You dabble in that, you're going to be an easy target. But the Jets were just pretty messy, really, to be kind here. And the Steelers, while they've had their share of drama with Pickens and then prior to that with other guys, it's Tomlin, it's Khan, it's ownership. It's buttoned up. They're a legacy franchise in the league, whereas the Jets have mostly been a punchline. How much of an impact, if any, do you think that has on Rodgers?
Let's remember, it's sort of, Green Bay, was a model of stability, is a model of stability, and has been really for the last 30-ish years, right? So there are, and that's where he spent the vast majority of his career outside of the last 2 seasons. So it's sort of a return to that sort of structure. And look, I think, and to your point, the day that he met with us at minicamp a few days after finally signing, part of the Aaron Rodgers experience is, 8 minutes into this 12-minute interview, somebody says, "Hey, what's that ring you got on there?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a wedding ring." And we're like, someone's like, "You got married?" He goes, "Oh, yeah." "When did that happen?" "I don't know, a while ago." And like that immediately becomes trending, right? Like that immediately vaults itself onto ESPN's headlines. And it's not anything else that he said, right? Like, but to me, like, that's sort of the Aaron Rodgers show, right? Like, here's the shiny thing that's going to make people go, "What over here?" But here's the substance over here in the other corner. And, I think, and, I asked him, "Why are you still playing?" And he said, the gist of what he said is, "I'm doing this because I want to go out on a better note than I would have had I ended my career after 2 years in New York." And I think that he is playing for his legacy in some. I think the Jets, if the Steelers go 11-6, 12-5, win a playoff game, and he rides off into the sunset, people are going to view. It's just going to put the prism even more squarely on, man, the Jets really just had a chance with this good dude, and just obviously the injury the first year, but the second year just they just screwed it up. So I think he is playing for something that's you can't count in money, and you can't even muse about on the Pat McAfee show, right? Like, I think he's playing for the way that people will talk about him as a player in 6 or 7 years when he goes into Canton.
Did he play Week 18 last year? I don't know. Week 17 here, his Jets were down. He did not. His Jets were down. Well, he did, actually. 40-0 was the score. Bills in the third quarter against Rodgers and the Jets. He did play the following week against the Dolphins. It'll be a fun week 1 with Rodgers against Fields and the Steelers and the Jets. Kind of weird for 2 quarterbacks to start against their previous team head-to-head right away.
Yeah, and it's, and Justin Fields, look, I really enjoyed having him around. He's a nice guy, kind of did everything the right way. Kind of got hosed a little bit, by the circumstance. That was a Mike Tomlin call to go to Russell Wilson. But Justin's going to be playing to prove that he's worth the $20 million a year that the Jets are paying him, and like the Steelers had an opportunity to match that contract and they chose not to. So that tells you what the Steelers thought about him as a long-term solution at quarterback. So he's got plenty to play for. And Rodgers, will be wanting. I think this guy just, sort of revels in pettiness a little bit, right? I think that's just sort of kind of part of the whole show with him. And I think that he wants to. I'm sure he'll be wanting to stick it to the Jets. But it's also going to be, that being said, you're going to have. Look, the Steelers have overhauled their offense, their skill position. Set offensively pretty significantly. You have a new quarterback. You got a number one receiver, DK Metcalf. Jonnu Smith is new. You got your rookie running back to join Jalen Warren, the kid from Iowa to join Jalen Warren in the backfield. You moved your right tackle to left tackle finally. You have last year's first-round pick who was hurt all year, kind of coming back and being able to start at right tackle. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and it could be and they're not likely to play together much during the preseason, during that one preseason game they played week 2, I guess, right? So it could be there'll be a lot at stake, but I think the football itself is probably going to be pretty ugly early, which is where the Steelers are hoping hey, we're going to do what we always kind of do week 1, week 2, week 3, and kind of win some games that maybe we're not supposed to because our defense does something that it typically does, and we have a guy named T.J. Watt that sort of specializes in that kind of stuff, right? So, I don't see Rodgers, as much as he'll want to, going in there and lighting it up at MetLife week 1, and I don't see Justin. I see the Steelers defense just pinning his ears back, ready to kind of hit Justin Fields in the way they weren't allowed to during practice last year.
So you mentioned the new parts here and Najee Harris out. I feel like for the last couple of years, there's been certainly amongst the fan base on social media, Jalen Warren, get him more touches. He's more dangerous than Harris. Is he up to being 1A, the guy, or is the door open for Kaleb Johnson to make that a timeshare or even just sort of settle into the role that Najee Harris played?
Yeah, I think Kaleb Johnson's certainly the long-term solution there. Jalen, you have nothing but respect for a guy who kind of makes the team as an undrafted rookie free agent and then outlasts a first-rounder, right, that they invested in. And he is an excellent change-of-pace guy. It's just hard to envision him, and I don't think the Steelers envision him as a 20 to 25 touch guy. I would not be surprised if by week 2, maybe even week 1, Kaleb Johnson is sort of the starter. There's going to be, those Steelers will always talk about there's lots of touches to go around, and they did. Look, Najee Harris was productive, by today's NFL running back standards. 1,000 yards first 4 years. I know it doesn't mean what it meant when they were playing 14-game seasons, but it's still a statistically significant plateau, right? And yet Jalen Warren was still the guy when he got the ball in his hands that was more exciting, that kind of had more of the big play potential. And also, by the way, a guy that loves to block. And it has cost him many tens of thousands of dollars the last couple of years because he keeps getting letters from the commissioner's office saying, hey, you can't hit guys like that. But he loves it because he's he's listed at 5', he's 5'9" and 220 pounds, right? He loves that sort of little guy stuff. It's hard for me to envision him becoming, the full-on lead dog where he gets 25 carries and 2 receptions a week. I really think they view Kaleb Johnson as sort of the next Najee Harris, Le'Veon Bell type. When Mike Tomlin was talking about him after they drafted him, he said, look, he went to Iowa. You see a lot of what Mike called Sunday fronts, a lot of defenses who knew exactly what was coming because you're playing Iowa, and the guy was effective anyway. And that is something that jumped off the tape to the Steelers, and I think that they view Kaleb Johnson, the bigger guy, as sort of the guy. I think he's their guy for probably the next 3 to 5 years.
Harris really did have the same season 4 times. 1,000 yards, 4 yards a carry. At a time in football history that would have played, but not really anymore.
Franco Harris didn't even do that, right?
Yeah.
But it was a different time, right?
Yeah.
It was just a different time in football.
And he also had that one game, Bulldog, when Roethlisberger was still the quarterback, where he got 19 targets. Think about Najee Harris getting 19 targets in a game. Week 3 in his rookie year. Cook had 38 all year last year.
That breaks my brain.
But I mean, I think that speaks to sort of that might happen this year because I think, the line in 2021 in Najee's rookie season was not great. And I'm not saying that this line, with Broderick Jones now at left tackle and Isaac Seumalo at right tackle and, Mason McCormick at one guard and Isaac Seumalo at the other one and the kid from Zach Frazier, in his second-year center, they could be good. But I think, they have a 41-year-old quarterback who can't move like he used to. And I think he is very much where Ben was at the end of his career. And Ben was like, man, I took a lot of shots. I am done taking shots.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons Najee had 19 targets in a game because Ben was like, you know what, I could stay in here for another half second and get my brains beat in a little bit more, or I could dump it off to my running back. And I really think there's a huge potential for that, especially early in the season for Rodgers.
I like it. And Rodgers has always loved to do it. I mean, in his MVP years, he threw 60, 70 passes to Aaron Jones. So it was kind of a part of his game already. Before you go, Will, how do you think Metcalf works as a fit for Rodgers and the Steelers?
Well, I mean, look, they made it. This isn't. They might be taking 1-year flyers on Aaron Rodgers and Jalen Ramsey, and but they're not taking a 1-year flyer on DK Metcalf. I mean, they gave him a 5-year deal. I believe that I think there was a reason that DK, although he showed up for team stuff, that he wasn't there during OTAs. I mean, he had been in the building, he had been in meetings, he had been on the field, throwing the ball around with the guys not named Aaron Rodgers. But when it came time to play football or whatever facsimile you get during OTAs, it's pretty telling that he wasn't there. Aaron Rodgers is he recruited Rod. He set up that meeting that. At UCLA that, oh, by the way, here's somebody around to randomly videotape this. How did this happen? I don't believe it, right? I think that they sort of picked each other. I think, DK understands I'm going to have a Hall of Famer throwing me the ball this season, and then next season, who knows, right? So he's going to be highly motivated to be productive and fit in and be, look, the guy's a physical marvel, right? I mean, he is. He's if you look at him, you're like, oh, my God. And his numbers are good, but you're always like, how is this guy not a 115 catch, 1,800-yard, 15 touchdown guy, right? I don't think that's going to happen in Pittsburgh just because of the nature of the offense. But I really do think he wants to prove he is worth the money that the Steelers gave him. And I think he's at least the first year anyway. I certainly think we're going to get the good soldier DK Metcalf, as opposed to the guy that could sometimes have his emotions get the better of him in Seattle when things didn't go maybe the way that he wanted.
Do you think they got out of the Minkah Fitzpatrick business at the right time, or do you think that there's a void back there?
They made a decision that, Minkah was, a year from now was going to be in the same position that TJ Watt was in this offseason, right? Entering the final year of his deal. Unlike TJ, Minkah can't point to his resume, although, look, widely respected, perennial All-Pro. Hadn't made the splash plays that, were sort of the hallmark in the early stages of his career. A lot of that, the Steelers, from Terrell Austin, their defensive coordinator, to Mike Tomlin, on down, would point to scheme, that it was, Minkah's job to keep a lid on it, to prevent big plays. But you know what? They decided that that TJ was worth, $43 million or $41 million a year for a 3-year extension after his 30th birthday. Minkah a couple years younger, but they weren't going to pay him. He's going to want to raise off the $23 million that he's making, and they were not going to do that, right? So, to get Smith and Jalen Ramsey, it's a pretty good trade. Pretty beneficial for them. I'll be curious though. I mean, people get on Minkah for not making the big plays, but let's remember what happened late in the season, including against Kansas City, but especially in the playoffs against the Ravens. Was it Minkah Fitzpatrick's fault that the 9 guys, we'll take the other safety, Deshaun Elliott, we'll take him out of the equation, the 9 guys in front of him couldn't tackle Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson as the ball got shoved down their throat? Is it Minkah's fault that he was forced to try to tackle these guys 15 yards downfield? So whatever problems the Steelers defense had at the end of the season, Minkah Fitzpatrick was not one of them, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I also think, though, that this is a guy that takes this football very, very, very seriously. And look, an NFL locker room is like any other office in the world, any other business in the world. There's different personalities. There's different approaches to the job. But I mean, if Minkah Fitzpatrick, a Nick Saban guy, if Nick Saban was designing a football player in a lab from the neck up, he would want. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick would be that guy, right? And he is that guy. So I just think they decided they weren't going to pay him after next year. They didn't want to have the drama that they had with TJ this offseason going into next year. Better to just sort of, kind of make a trade that looks like it might be mutually beneficial for both sides. Minkah's going to be fine. The Steelers, they have Deshaun Elliott. Maybe he probably moves into Minkah's spot because they signed him to doing a 2-year deal. Maybe they have Jalen Ramsey, who's still pretty good on the outside, but maybe they move him to corner. I'm sorry, they move him to one of the safety spots. But I think Minkah is going to have a pretty productive year in Miami. And I think that there's going to be a time in like late October where the Steelers are going to be wondering, why did we trade Minkah again? But that's just me.
Well, it may work for Aaron Rodgers, but I'd best be careful if I'm asked, and I never am, when did you get married? And I say, I don't know, a while ago. I'd probably not want to put it quite that way out loud. But
I mean, it was very, very bizarre, and we don't even know. Like my boss. So I'm writing this whole story that day. It's good for my soul to be here and whatever. And then I threw in at the end about the marriage thing, and it was sort of like, this is sort of what it's like to be this is just part of the show. He randomly says that he's married, right? Then I get a note from my boss. Can we write 300 words separately on him saying he's married because it's trending and whatever? I'm like, we don't even know who he married.
Right.
He mentioned a name on McAfee in December, and that's what we're going on. And he's like, look, that's pin it on him, but that's what we're doing. That is the